Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd.
Thanks, Brad. As a business and healthcare law firm, we meet a lot of interesting people and learn their amazing stories. This season's theme is compliance fundamentals, and we're taking real client stories and, of course, scrubbing names, and we are building around these stories, kind of navigating compliance obstacles in the business of healthcare.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot about compliance this season, Michael, and it to some people it can be a very scary word. For those that don't know, what does it mean?
You mean not everyone like you has it tattooed on your back and loves it?
Well, I think most people would love my tattoo on my back which says compliance.
Okay. Yeah, compliance is a broad word. It's used to capture all the laws that govern the practice of medicine or, other healthcare practices. And there are both state and federal laws that can come into play. Healthcare, as we've talked about, is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the U.S. And so if you're being compliant, it means that you're running your practice in compliance with these various laws.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we discussed in other shows, compliance is not stagnant.
True, it is not. And so, Brad, before we have a guest today, I'm really excited about a client of ours. And so before we get started, though, I have a question.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Lake Superior State University?
No, but I'm afraid to ask why now.
Well, they apparently, because I've just learned about this recently, each year they publish a list of banished words.
Okay. Is that the same as like the 7 deadly words you can't say on TV?
No, I don't think it is the same, Brad. So the university has a tradition actually dating back to 1976, where each year they publish a list of words and phrases that have worn out their welcome.
1976. Is that the first year you started practicing law?
No, but I was alive. I was 6.
Okay. Okay, so that's kind of reminds me, banished words, kind of like he who should not be named.
No, I'm not going to get sucked into your Harry Potter talk. Let's keep it. This is not a movie podcast.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through the list, and I want you to confess, and I won't tell anyone.
Okay.
Which of these words you need to stop using? Where are you guilty?
Okay.
And I may add a little color to a few of the things along the way.
Perfect. This is going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to it. Go.
All right. Word number 1, cringe. Hearing someone say cringe is actually kind of cringe in of itself.
Yeah, I get it. It can be cringe to hear cringe said too many cringy times, and that can be cringe-worthy.
Okay, I shouldn't have egged you on there. All right. Second word.
Yeah.
Game changer. I mean, we've all watched a lot of sports, and I don't think I've ever watched a game when an announcer has not used that statement.
I agree.
Okay. You ready for the third one?
Yes.
Era. I think the Swifties have worn this one out.
Yeah, I have to be careful how to respond to that because my wife and daughter are big Swifties, so no comment.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, the Philadelphia fans that booed Taylor Swift may agree.
Okay.
All right. Next one is dropped. And so they're kind of referring to, books or music when they say, this song just dropped.
Okay. Yeah, that didn't bother me.
Okay. Number 5, the acronym IYKYK. If you know, you know.
Yeah, I actually have seen that used as a billboard by a plaintiff attorney in New Orleans. So maybe it is time for that word to be banished.
So am I keeping track that so far none of these are words you use too much? Okay, good. Next one is sorry, not sorry.
Again, not a word I really use, but we do have a great story of one of our colleagues who used it one night, and it was very funny, but we don't think we have enough time for that story tonight.
Yes.
Today.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is one that unfortunately is something I know way too well. The word skibbity, which is what the term that the Gen Zers call brain rot. And so I unfortunately have heard this word many times because of my 15-year-old daughter, Alex. It's a regular part of her vocabulary.
First off, I don't use brain rot or the skibbity word, so I'm not concerned about that. I don't even think I've ever heard skibbity before this.
Okay, well, and I don't think you'll ever start using it because I don't think you could pronounce it.
Yeah, well, I already forgot the word.
Okay, next one, 100%. And I have to confess just to you that I have said this word and I need to stop. 100%.
Are you supposed to say a lesser percentage than 100%?
Well, it does lose its emphasis.
Yeah.
If you did that. So I think we just need to come up with something more creative and normal.
Yeah. Well, I don't really use it often, though.
Okay. Next word is utilize. And I think the point that the reason they want to banish it is that it would just work fine just to say use.
Disagree. I love to utilize that word.
Oh, okay. And the final one is period, used for emphasis when you just say period at the end of a statement.
Yeah, never ever came across my mouth ever saying that. So I think we need to move on.
You came out kind of clean.
Yeah. Bring on our guest. So,
okay.
Period. I'm done saying that now.
Okay. All right. Our guest today is Patrick Blake. He is a co-founder. He's a co-founder and CMO at Portrait. He is a board-certified dermatologist. Patrick lectures around the country in aesthetics. He's a mentor to students interested in dermatology and aesthetics. He's a client of ByrdAdatto, and he's a first-time guest on our podcast. Patrick, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, this is me fun, Patrick. And, we're going to hit you with a really hard question right up front. Are you a user of any of these banished words that we just went through?
Yes, to a degree, but I would say I am I do encounter a lot of those much more than I would like. So I'm not a heavy user of any of them. So maybe I guess I'm not going to be in a tough spot with these. But the one that I see a lot is or hear all the time is the 100%.
Yes.
I think when it really means more like I agree.
Yes.
And it's not. I mean, it's not like you have some kind of complex insight. It's like we should go for lunch. 100%. That's kind of a yes no or something. So,
yes.
And skibbity, I think I definitely because I do see patients myself too, and so interact with enough teenagers to expand my vocabulary regularly. But skibbity is for me, but I've heard it enough, I think, already. So
yes, yeah. I think we're all in agreement that we're supportive of the of this banished word study.
There you go.
I'll have to work on my daughter on skibbity.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, let's jump in. And so, for our audience that hasn't met you yet, I would love to hear, Patrick, a little bit about your background. You're a dermatologist. How did you kind of get started in this world, and then what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. Take interest in pretty much everything, and I'm a nerd through and through. So I was in med school at the Cleveland Clinic. Reason that's relevant is just they do a ton of innovation, and even as a student, rethinking how systems flow, systems operate, and being comfortable kind of, changing things, So I think it was a very different program from most medical schools. And then did research at NIH through a Howard Hughes Fellowship. So kind of got really into exploring projects and processes in detail. And I think as physicians, most of the time, we're kind of more, what did we do today? Thinking a little bit shorter term. And so that was an exercise, I think, in carrying a long-term project to fruition and fighting through the challenges and that kind of thing. Finished derm residency in 2014 and moved out to San Diego and kind of was doing basically everything dermatology, the full gamut. But got a little bit, I guess slightly bored maybe, or under challenged somewhere along the line. And that's always a bad spot for me to be in, or a dangerous spot. So I connected with my co-founder, Praveen, and we were kind of interested in really direct to patient sort of consumer health type things. So a lot of personalized medicine, compounded meds, and sort of a telehealth delivery system. And that was really cool. And I think we developed some really great products. I won't use the word game changer, period. So it was, we developed some really great products, but had some trouble getting, I would say, market fit or awareness, or figuring out how to get that message across. And in the process, I started talking to a couple of friends of mine, one in particular who is a dermatology PA I had worked with previously, with incredible aesthetics knowledge, and delivers incredible outcomes. And we kind of learned about her experience as an employee at a very, I won't say like exploitative, but they certainly weren't valuing her as a person or as a provider at this business. And so we saw that as a place to really make an impact in terms of how you could get the right people to realize their value. And I think as a provider, that obviously resonates with me quite a bit. So I never saw myself kind of going down this path of trying to be like a business behind a business. It's certainly nothing I ever trained for, but it's been fun, and it's been very mission driven, which I think has helped us kind of push forward. We launched Portrait and what we do now in 2019, right before COVID got cranking, and so not the opportune time, but that's okay. It's gone well since.
Well, so it sounds like in your heart you're a serial entrepreneur with all these different things going, and so you just mentioned Portrait. So for our audience that's not familiar, what does Portrait do?
Yeah, so we think of ourselves as sort of the everything aesthetics company, and our goal is to really level the playing field so that small businesses can compete with large chain private equity backed companies. And so sometimes people will refer to us as a franchise or as a roll up, and those things are really couldn't be much further from the truth. And this is a philosophical thing, but it's also proven out in real life, that I've seen and strongly believe that when you have providers sort of really owning that patient relationship and having a chance to really own the outcomes end to end, and have the creativity and the ability to influence or to drive their own branding and their own reviews and all of that, they can do really good work. It's just that there's a lot, as you guys know, through and through, just to running a business and getting it set up and operating day to day. So we try to provide all of that kind of back end work, as well as some things that are very patient facing as well. But we try to set them up so that anyone can really compete and win in even though I do think there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of mentorship, it's also competitive. And so without someone kind of, supporting, I think, small businesses, it becomes pretty challenging. So we're trying to solve that issue.
Do you have a lot or most of your clients that are signing on, are they starting? Is that where they are in their kind of life cycle? Or do you also have others that are in different stages?
Yeah, so it's evolved for sure. When we first started going, it was really the people who needed us the most, who were experienced, mostly non-physician providers who were wanting to launch. Since then, we have evolved quite a bit in being more flexible and being able to be more inclusive and add value for we think, maybe not really large chain med spas, but for just about anybody else in aesthetics. and wellness to a degree as well. And so we have people who have been up and running for years and have multiple locations and numerous providers and that kind of thing. Most are still solo provider, practices or businesses, but across the board there.
I just saw an article in the last couple of weeks that came out about Portrait, and I can't remember the title, if it was that Portrait is the antithesis to private equity or the solution. But tell me a little bit about, do you know which article I'm referring to?
Yeah, I think that's probably a quote from me because I'm a little bit unhinged sometimes. So, so I hope we're not going to draw any ire for that. But I think that's probably something I specifically said. I didn't realize it was used as the title, but yeah, it sounds about right. So yeah, I do think of us that way, and probably in part, I've seen amazing private equity experiences and deals and seen obviously I because of who I trained with, I think I know more physicians who've gone into that private equity motion, and I've seen people who got into big complex lawsuits and had their practice changed, and their good staff were kind of turned out, and other folks were brought in. So I've seen that where I think people have lost some some autonomy in their workflow, which I view as a bit problematic for a lot of reasons. And I also have seen it where it hasn't always played out great for the private equity backers either, because if you don't have passionate clinicians, particularly in aesthetics, you're going to have a problem. That you need people who are enthusiastic, bought in every day. You got to be on all the time, which I think is it's because I do my own aesthetics too, so I experience that in real life. That if you're having a bad day, like, too bad, you got to figure that out. So I think we try to, but the reality is all of that efficiency that private equity brings is a huge value, and you want people to be able to focus on their work. And when you're trying to learn to run a business, or even just running a business without support, it makes it hard to see patients. It makes it hard to spend time with your family. So yeah, I would say we're a low key antithesis.
Yeah, well, and I'll say the article didn't come across as a poke at private equity. It came across as, here's another way another route you can go, and so, but it was really fascinating. So. I'm also curious. So you may have heard at the beginning, our theme this season is compliance. And I'd love to hear kind of you talk a little bit about your compliance journey at Portrait and how Portrait helps its clients on that front.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first thing I would say, major shout out to AmSpa, because when we first started going on this, and I mean, most dermatologists, we're pretty, risk averse. I wouldn't say neurotic, but we lean that way a little bit, maybe, a little OCD. And I felt like we had covered our bases pretty well. And then I went to the AmSpa meeting, and I'm not, like, for better or worse, I'm not much of a note taker in training or anything. And I took a lot of notes, and I came back and had a lot of work to do and to rethink. And so even as someone who, I was trying to be pretty thoughtful, I guess I'd put it that way, when we were first going, and you're always going to have, blind spots. So I think that was I think that was really helpful for me. I mean, we got lucky in a sense, not that we had any huge gaps, but there were a lot of things that could be improved upon. And so that was my first experience in saying, okay, the same way, you need to know what you're doing on a medical side before you start doing anything. You really need to know that on the legal compliance side as well. Unfortunately, it's a little bit harder to get that knowledge than it is sort of the medical stuff, because you can't go pop into someone's clinic and you can't read things, and you really can't YouTube it that much. Now there are a lot of great, resources and podcasts and whatnot, but at that time, 5 years ago, I think there were less. It was harder to get access. And I think the other side is appreciating the same way in medicine. I'm just drawing these, analogs because that's been my experience, that things change. And so, you can't keep the same mindset you had 5 years ago. And the same way the standard of care changes medically, the standard of care and the standard of operating, changes on a legal compliance side. We've also, because of the nature of the business, I've been involved in helping hundreds of providers at this point, and entrepreneurs as well. And so I'm sure preaching to the choir here, that line of, I think things that should be canceled. Well, my friend, don't care what your friend thought or told you or is down the road or something, because you just, there's just so much lack of knowledge in this space, and people who've kind of launched without checking the depth, in the pool first and that kind of thing, or jumped without checking the depth. And we, like yesterday, Tuesday night, I was talking to a friend, a nurse who's here in California, about a friend of hers who just went through an investigation of things that transpired 3 years ago at a I'll call it non-compliant office, and is now on probation. It's either a 1 year or 2 year probation, and didn't, was trying to do things the right way, and now has all that complexity. And so those things come out, and I think no one wants to talk about them. Nobody, starts like posting about that on their Instagram. So folks aren't aware. And so for us, it's been, just listening to good, getting good guidance. Also not always getting good guidance. So finding the right people to pick their brains, and being diligent and, process oriented, and making sure that people are well set up.
So that's an amazing aspect, really understanding all about portrait. But, one of the things I think we're trying to deal with right now, just understand the industry as a whole. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing in the aesthetic industry right now?
I think, several. One, which is like so many facets of life, right? The pros and cons of social media that I do see. I see sometimes where patients are directing care a bit, and I think this is consumer health to a degree, so that makes, they should have a big role. But I sometimes see people being pushed into procedures that don't, providers being pushed into procedures that don't make sense, and that's where I've seen them get into trouble sometimes. I've also feel like I see things where people pick up ideas or decide that something is well established based on social media, rather than sort of leaning into evidence or, good like strong data, good trials. So I think even though there's a lot of knowledge, in some ways there is a lot of misinformation, out there as well. And then just the complexity of the world. So I think, again, I see it more from the perspective of small business owners, but anyone who's been alive knows costs of everything are going up quite a bit, and so I think that creates a lot of challenges for, one is making sure patients have money in their wallet to spend at somebody's business. Another one is that I think it does make people think about taking shortcuts a little bit, because they feel more pressure, in order to be successful.
That's amazing. Yeah. All great points. And believe it or not, we have, our time has flown by. We have reached the end. Patrick, we're so grateful that you have joined us for today's show. What we'll do next is say goodbye, and then on the other side of the commercial, Brad and I'll have a quick legal wrap up. Thank you.
For sure. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Sure, glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
Well, welcome back to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. Now, Michael, as we've talked about already, but this season's theme is compliance fundamentals. And we just had a great conversation with Patrick talking to us about portrait, but more importantly about what he's seeing in the aesthetic industry as it relates to just compliance. And, at the, tail end of the conversation, he started talking about what is he seeing in the aesthetic industry and maybe some concerns of things that he thinks can be fine-tuned. And I thought it was interesting that people are so online nowadays with all their social media interactions, and they see all these things that are going on. And as a trained physician, he was noticing things that, that's not quite right, or I wouldn't recommend it that direction. And I started thinking about, we've talked about this, more of a herd mentality where it must be okay because everyone on social media is doing it this way. And as a reminder, they may be doing it that way, but that doesn't mean it's going to be consistent with the standard of care that's required in your particular state. You have to be very careful that just because someone's doing it through their media outlets or whatever they're doing, that you need to make sure, is that the best way to practice?
Yeah, I thought that, he's so insightful and smart, and he says things that we talk about, and he says it in a really kind of concise and powerful way. And I loved how he said, that basically compliance has its own standard of care and that it changes. And it was just it was a powerful way to communicate that point that compliance is not stagnant. And then I loved also, him talking about, having some banished words in our compliance world. It made me think we should be inspired and come up with our own compliance banished words and create our list. And, I think starting with the my friend told me is what he said.
Yes.
I'm sure we could extend a much
Well, that would be
list.
a banished word number one. Banished word number two is, I heard it from another attorney.
Yes.
That enigma attorney that's out there that no one ever knows their name.
What about everybody else is doing it?
That's probably a good one also.
Yeah.
Depending on your state, medical director.
Now, the banished word they would probably give us is it depends.
That would be the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 word for lawyers of banished word.
It's a gray area.
Yes, that's true. Well, Michael, before we sign off, that was fun. I enjoyed what Patrick had to say. Any final thoughts?
No, I love that, that he was vulnerable and shared that compliance is hard, and that, he, poked at himself and said, dermatologists are almost neurotic and have a little OCD. And yet, as much as he felt like he was taking the right steps, he realized when getting educated about compliance that there were some gaps, and so it should relieve the pressure valve a little bit for everybody out there to understand that this is an aspect of a business that is hard, and that there's a lot of ground to be gained just by leaning into it and learning and getting help.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have today. We'll be back next Wednesday when we continue our journey of learning about compliance fundamentals, when our partner and series regular, Jay Riero, joins us again to discuss membership programs and the applications to a medical practice. Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto